You know that feeling in the pit of your stomach? That cold, sinking sensation when you realize the world isn't what you thought it was? I was standing in the pouring rain, watching through the steamed-up windows of an auto repair shop at 11 p.m., and I felt it. My girlfriend's car was hoisted up on a lift, and her so-called best friend wasn't fixing it. He was breaking it, methodically, deliberately. A loose wire here, a slightly drained fluid reservoir there. This wasn't a repair. It was a slow-motion assassination of a perfectly good Toyota, and I finally understood. Every missed date, every canceled anniversary, every single time she'd been stranded and he'd swooped in like some knight in shining armor. It was all a lie. He wasn't her savior. He was her architect of chaos. And the worst part, by the time I pieced it all together, she was already in so deep she couldn't see the walls he'd built around her. She couldn't see that the man she trusted most was systematically isolating her from everyone, especially from me. But to understand how we got to that rainy night, I need to take you back to the beginning, to when Leo first entered our lives, not with a bang, but with the quiet, friendly click of a ratchet. You know that feeling in the pit of your stomach? That cold, sinking sensation when you realize the world isn't what you thought it was? I was standing in the pouring rain, watching through the steamed-up windows of an auto repair shop at 11 p.m., and I felt it. My girlfriend's car was hoisted up on a lift, and her so-called best friend wasn't fixing it. He was breaking it, methodically, deliberately. A loose wire here, a slightly drained fluid reservoir there. This wasn't a repair. It was a slow-motion assassination of a perfectly good Toyota, and I finally understood. Every missed date, every canceled anniversary, every single time she'd been stranded and he'd swooped in like some knight in shining armor. It was all a lie. He wasn't her savior, he was her architect of chaos. And the worst part? By the time I pieced it all together, she was already in so deep she couldn't see the walls he'd built around her. She couldn't see that the man she trusted most was systematically isolating her from everyone, especially from me. But to understand how we got to that rainy night, I need to take you back to the beginning, to when Leo first entered our lives, not with a bang, but with the quiet, friendly click of a ratchet. Her name was Chloe, and for the first 6 months it was easy, the kind of easy that makes you forget you're even trying. We'd met at a bookstore, of all places, both reaching for the same worn copy of a Vonnegut novel. Classic, right? She had this laugh that could cut through the worst of my days. I felt like I'd won the lottery. We built this little world together, full of inside jokes and Saturday morning pancake rituals. I thought it was us against the world. Then, I met Leo. Leo was the childhood friend, the one who'd been there through every breakup and bad haircut. He was a mechanic, owned his own shop, Leo's Garage, and on the surface he was fine, polite in a distant sort of way. But from our very first introduction at a backyard barbecue, the vibe was off. He'd shake my hand, but his eyes were already scanning over my shoulder for Chloe. If I told a story, he'd find a way to one-up it, or just subtly change the subject back to something he and Chloe had done a decade ago. It was a masterclass in passive-aggressive dismissal. Chloe would just laugh it off. "Oh, that's just Leo. He's protective. He's like a brother to me." And you want to believe that, you know? You don't want to be the jealous boyfriend. So I swallowed my discomfort, chalked it up to my own insecurity. But then the car troubles started. Her old Honda Civic, Betsy, started developing the most convenient case of mechanical hypochondria. It would only ever act up when I wasn't around, always when Leo was free. A dead battery on a Tuesday morning. A mysterious squeak only he could hear. It was the start of a pattern, a crack in our foundation I was too naive to see widening. Little did I know, those small inconveniences were just the opening act. Leo was about to move from subtle digs to full-scale engineering the perfect excuse to become the most indispensable man in her life. The emergencies escalated with brutal precision. It was never anything catastrophic, always just inconvenient enough to require his immediate heroics. Our anniversary dinner? Canceled. Her alternator gave out an hour before our reservation. A weekend getaway I'd planned for months? Scrapped. The brakes, he said, were dangerously worn. He just happened to be driving by her place and noticed them. How convenient. Each rescue mission was a brick in a wall between us. I'd hear about it all later, delivered with a sigh of relief from Chloe. Thank God for Leo. I don't know what I'd do without him. and I'd just nod, that cold knot tightening in my gut. I started noticing things, little details that didn't add up. The corrosion on her battery terminals looked fresh and grainy, like it had been applied, not naturally formed. The slipping transmission would mysteriously be perfect for a day or two after he fixed it, only to fail again the moment I was out of town. I wasn't a mechanic, but I wasn't a fool either. This wasn't bad luck. This was a pattern, a calculated campaign of sabotage. He wasn't just fixing her car, he was breaking her life, and mine along with it. The real turning point was the night of her office holiday party. I was her +1. Leo, somehow, was also there. He spent the entire evening holding court by the punch bowl, holding her elbow, guiding her through the room like he was the host. I watched him, a glass of cheap champagne going warm in my hand, and I saw it all so clearly. This wasn't about friendship. This was about possession. He was marking his territory in a room full of her colleagues, and she was completely oblivious, laughing at his jokes, basking in the attention. I had become a ghost in my own relationship, fading into the background of a picture he was meticulously painting himself into. But the universe has a funny way of handing you opportunities. A few days later, her car died again. This time, Leo was supposedly out of town. For the first time in months, she called me, and for the first time I got to the car before he did. I popped the hood, and there it was. The battery cable wasn't just loose, it was deliberately disconnected. The clamp finger tightened just enough to look connected at a glance. It was a small thing, a simple thing, but it was proof. This was no accident. This was intentional. The curtain had been pulled back, and the pathetic little man behind it was finally exposed. That silent, disconnected cable screamed louder than any argument we'd ever had. It was the evidence I needed, but it was also a bomb. I knew that showing it to Chloe wouldn't bring her to my side. It would just make me look more paranoid, more jealous. He had built his web of lies so well that the truth itself looked like a fabrication, so I didn't say a word. I reconnected the cable. Her car started instantly, and I told her it must have just been a loose connection. The look of relief on her face wasn't for me. It was for the idea that her night would soon be back to handle things properly. I drove her home in a silence so heavy you could feel its weight. My mind was racing, plotting. If I was going to expose him, I needed irrefutable, undeniable proof. I needed to catch him in the act. I became a man possessed. My life narrowed to a single burning focus: catching Leo in the act. I started tracking his schedule, noting when he opened and closed his shop. I memorized the sound of his truck's engine. I felt like a private investigator in my own crumbling relationship. And let me tell you, the irony was bitter. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Chloe called, her voice that now familiar mix of frustration and helplessness. The car had died again, right outside her gym. And of course, Leo was already on his way. I was nearby, and a cold determination settled over me. This ended today. I parked my car a block away from her gym, my heart hammering against my ribs. I watched him pull up in his tow truck, all friendly smiles and reassuring pats on her shoulder. I watched him load her car onto the flatbed with practiced ease. And then I followed them. I stayed 3 cars back, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, following the glow of his brake lights all the way to his shop. He didn't take it to a specialist. He drove straight to Leo's garage. I parked in the shadows across the street, the engine ticking as it cooled, and I waited. Through the grimy garage window, I saw him put her car on the lift. He didn't get tools. He just looked. He walked around it, a predator inspecting his trap. Then he did something. I couldn't see exactly what from that angle, but he reached up near the wheel well, did something quick and deliberate, and lowered the car. It took him less than 2 minutes. That wasn't a diagnosis. That was a trigger being pulled. He then spent the next 20 minutes in his office with Chloe, probably spinning a story about a complex rotor issue or a failing caliper. I just sat there, watching, my blood running cold. He drove her home, and I almost left. But something told me to wait. And 30 minutes later, he came back, alone. He put the car back on the lift, and this time, he got his tools. This time, he actually fixed whatever minor thing he had just broken. He was cleaning up his own mess, ensuring the problem would lie dormant until the next strategically timed failure. I finally had it. The whole sickening cycle captured in my mind. The creation of the crisis, the performance of the rescue, and the covert cleanup. It was meticulous, it was psychotic. I drove home that night with the absolute certainty of what I had to do. I had to make her see. I planned it all out. I'd be calm. I'd be logical. I'd present my evidence like a lawyer making a closing argument. But love and logic rarely speak the same language, and I was about to learn that lesson the hardest way possible. I chose my moment carefully. I made her favorite meal, lit a candle, and tried to create a sliver of the peace we'd once had. I started gently, talking about how much I missed us, how I felt we'd been drifting. She agreed, but she had a different diagnosis. She said I'd been distant, suspicious. She said I didn't trust her friendship with Leo, and there it was, the perfect opening he'd created for her to walk right through. So I took a breath and laid it out. I told her about the conveniently timed breakdowns. I described the fresh corrosion I'd found. I told her everything, ending with what I'd seen through that garage window. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. She didn't get angry at first. She got this look of profound pity, like she was looking at a confused child who'd just told a wild, elaborate lie. She didn't believe a single word. Not one. "He's my friend," she said, her voice quiet and firm. "He fixes my car for free. He's helped me more than anyone. And you're trying to turn that into something sinister?" I saw it then, the unshakable fortress of belief he'd built inside her mind. My evidence was dismissed as paranoia. My concerns were jealousy. My love was control. The conversation spiraled into our first real, screaming fight. She accused me of trying to isolate her from her support system. She said if I couldn't handle her having a male friend, then maybe I wasn't the secure, confident man she thought I was. The twisted genius of Leo's plan was laid bare. He had positioned himself so perfectly that any attempt to question him only proved his point, that I was the problem. I was the toxic one. I went to bed that night on the couch staring at the ceiling, realizing I hadn't just lost the argument. I had lost her. She had already chosen her truth, and it was a story written by him. The Cold War that settled over our relationship after that was worse than the fighting. We moved around each other like polite roommates. Conversations were surface level. The warmth was gone, replaced by a constant humming tension. And Leo, his presence only grew. If he wasn't fixing her car, he was suddenly fixing things around her apartment. A leaky faucet, a wobbly shelf, projects I had offered to help with months ago, she now gave to him. He was erasing me, piece by piece, replacing my role in her life with his own. I was being edited out of my own story, and the worst part was, she was handing him the pen. I was a ghost in my own home, watching my future with her being dismantled and reassembled by another man, one calculated emergency at a time. I knew then it was only a matter of time before the final act played out. I just didn't know how spectacular the finale would be. The final unraveling began, ironically, with someone else's suspicion, Leo's girlfriend, Maya. I'd only met her a handful of times. A sharp, quiet woman who always seemed to be watching him a little too closely. She saw what I saw. She must have felt the same cold disconnect I did. She confronted him, and he gave her the same lines Chloe had given me. "It was nothing, I'm just helpful, you're being paranoid." But Maya wasn't invested in the lie. She didn't love him the way Chloe had grown to need him. She gave him an ultimatum: stop or I walk. And Leo, the master manipulator, made his choice. He chose Chloe. He went to her, poured his heart out, told her Maya had left him because she was jealous of their special friendship. He played the victim perfectly. And Chloe, she consoled him. She told him he deserved better. She was furious on his behalf. The man who had just been dumped was now spending more time at my girlfriend's apartment than I was. The final night, it was the transmission, the mother of all car repairs. He told her it was a catastrophic failure, that he had to take it to a specialist friend across town. It would take days. He'd be her personal chauffeur until then. I knew it was the final play. The ultimate act of manufactured dependency. I drove by his shop that night. His closed sign was up, but his personal truck was there. And so was Chloe's car, tucked in the back, not on a lift, not in pieces, just parked, waiting for its next scheduled breakdown. I didn't even feel anger anymore, just a profound, hollow sadness. I went home and Chloe was there, packing a small bag. She said she was going to stay with a friend for a few days. She needed space to think. She said Leo was heartbroken and needed a friend, and my negative energy wasn't helping. She said we were broken, and it was because I couldn't accept her life. She looked me in the eye and told me our love was suffocating her. The words weren't even hers. They were his. I could hear his voice in her syntax. I didn't fight it, I just nodded. The fight had been drained out of me. I helped her carry her bag to Leo's truck, which was idling at the curb. He was in the driver's seat, and he didn't look at me. He just stared straight ahead, a barely concealed smirk playing on his lips. He had won. He had systematically taken everything, and she had helped him do it. As they drove away, I stood on the sidewalk and felt the strangest sensation. It wasn't heartbreak. It was relief. The constant anxiety, the second-guessing, the feeling of living in a play where someone else was writing my lines. It was over. The house of cards had finally collapsed, and for the first time in months I could see the clear, open sky. He could have his victory. He could have the life he'd engineered, built on a foundation of lies and sabotage, because I knew, deep in my bones, that a relationship born from manipulation could never know a single day of real peace. His need to control would eventually become her prison, and my only job now was to walk away and let that truth find them both on its own. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just cleaned. I boxed up the few things she'd left behind, and I scrubbed the apartment like I was trying to erase the very memory of those last few toxic months. The silence was no longer heavy. It was clean. It was mine. A week later, a mutual friend told me they were officially together. It was presented as this beautiful, destined thing, how her supportive friend had become her rock, how they'd helped each other through tough times. The narrative was so perfect, so airtight, it made me question my own sanity for a moment. Had I imagined it all? Was I really the villain? But then I'd remember the sight of him under that car in the rain, and my resolve would harden again. Months passed. I focused on work, on friends I'd neglected, on rebuilding a life that was entirely my own. It was hard, but it was honest. And then, about 6 months later, I got a text. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was immediately. It was Chloe. It was a wall of text, the kind you send at 2 a.m. It was full of apologies and regret. She said it had started almost immediately. The help didn't stop once they were together. It just changed form. He'd started criticizing her friends, her job, her spending habits. The man who'd fixed everything began finding everything wrong with her. The control was absolute. He'd created a damsel in distress, and now he was ensuring she stayed forever in distress, forever needing him to fix the problems he himself pointed out. The final straw was her car. It had started having real, legitimate problems, a consequence of his constant tampering. But when she asked him to fix it, he told her it was too expensive, that she should have been more careful. The hero had retired the moment he'd won the prize. She was trapped. She'd burned her bridges with everyone who'd warned her, including me. She was isolated, just as he'd always planned. Her text wasn't asking for me back. It was just a confession screamed into the void, an admission that I had been right about everything. I read her words and I felt nothing. No gloating, no victory. Just a quiet, profound pity. I typed back a simple short message. I told her I was sorry for what she was going through. I told her she was strong enough to leave. And then I wished her well, and I blocked the number. Some stories you just can't re-enter. My role in that particular drama was over. Leo's justice wasn't poetic. It was pathetic. He got exactly what he wanted. Complete control over a person he had to break to own. And that's not a victory. That's a life sentence. I walked away with my freedom, and the hard-earned wisdom to never again ignore that cold, sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. It's not jealousy. It's your intuition screaming at you to run. The story doesn't end with some grand confrontation or a dramatic reunion. Life isn't a movie. The true justice was far quieter and, in many ways, far more complete. I heard through the grapevine that she did eventually leave him. It took her a year, but she found her way out. He, from what I understand, is still exactly where he's always been. In his garage, alone, probably already searching for his next project. A person who needs to create problems to feel needed will never know a moment of genuine peace or connection. That's his prison. He built it himself. As for me, I learned to trust my own eyes again. That cold feeling in my gut, I don't ignore it anymore. I see it for what it is now, not paranoia, but protection. The whole experience was a brutal lesson, but it taught me the value of a relationship that's easy, one that doesn't require a constant state of emergency to function. One built on calm mornings, not manufactured drama. I learned that love shouldn't be a triage unit. It should be a sanctuary. And sometimes, the most powerful act of justice isn't about winning someone back. It's about quietly closing the door, walking away, and building a peace so profound that the chaos you left behind can't even remember your name. That's how you win. You just live well. You let the truth, however long it takes, do all the talking for you.